Historical rivalries and ideological conflicts in Linux and open source. Introduction. The Linux and open source communities, despite their collaborative spirit, have been shaped by intense internal rivalries and ideological debates. From philosophical splits over software freedom to battles between projects and companies, these conflicts have influenced the evolution of open source. This article examines major historical rivalries such as Debian versus Red Hat and GNOME versus KDE, and the cultural divides, free software versus open source, community versus corporate, differing system architectures that underpin them. Key periods include the late 1990s and early 2000s, desktop wars, the mid-2010s init system controversy, and debates spurred by Canonical's initiatives, like the Mir display server and snap packages. The narrative is organized chronologically and thematically, maintaining an academic tone to analyze how each conflict arose and what it meant for the open source movement. The first major rift in the software community predates Linux itself. In the 1980s, Richard Stallman launched the free software movement, promoting the idea that software should guarantee users freedom to use, study, modify, and share it. This ethos was codified in the GNU project and the GNU General Public License, GPL. By the early 1990s, as Linus Torvalds' Linux kernel combined with GNU tools to form a complete system, Stallman's vision of free software, focused on ethics and users' rights, had a strong following. However, not everyone in the growing community embraced Stallman's moral and political framing. In 1998, a group of developers and advocates introduced the term open source as an alternative label. This new term was intended to be more palatable to businesses and to emphasize the practical benefits of sharing source code rather than freedom and ethics. The Open Source Initiative, OSI, was founded that year to promote a pragmatic, business-friendly view of collaborative software development. This marked a clear ideological split. The Free Software Foundation, FSF, continued to insist on the primacy of user freedoms and social values, while OSI and the open source camp focused on software quality, innovation, and market adoption. Though free software and open source referred to nearly the same set of licenses and projects, their proponents often clashed on values. Stallman argued that the open source movement's focus on practicality does not campaign for principles, and thus misses the point of software freedom. Many developers, including Torvalds, sided with the open source approach, valuing its appeal to efficiency and widespread use, while others stayed loyal to FSF's ideals. This cultural divide set the stage for later conflicts, as community members sometimes disagreed on whether strict adherence to freedom or a more flexible, inclusive approach would better serve the movement. As Linux gained popularity in the 1990s, different distributions emerged with distinct philosophies. Two of the earliest and most influential were Debian and Red Hat, which can be seen as representing a community-driven versus corporate-influenced approach. Debian, founded in 1993 by Ian Murdoch, is an entirely community-run project. Guided by its social contract and the Debian Free Software Guidelines, Debian commits to using and promoting free software as much as possible. It has a formal constitution and a democratic governance structure with elected leaders and voting by developers on major decisions. This strong emphasis on community values and transparency made Debian the largest non-commercial Linux distribution, developing a reputation for stability and ideological consistency. By policy, Debian carefully curates packages to meet strict quality standards and excludes proprietary software from its core distribution. Debian's ethos exemplified the free software spirit in practice, prioritizing user autonomy and community consensus. Red Hat, launched in 1994, took a different route. From the beginning, Red Hat Linux was conceived with the corporate world in mind. Red Hat Inc. built a successful business model around Linux, offering paid support, services, and later subscription-based enterprise distributions. By the early 2000s, Red Hat had become almost synonymous with Linux in commercial contexts, reflecting how deeply the company penetrated the enterprise market. In contrast to Debian's volunteer base, most development on Red Hat's distributions was done by salaried engineers. Red Hat did contribute extensively to free software, but it balanced open source principles with business considerations. For example, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHL, was distributed to customers in binary form under a paid subscription, even though its source code was freely available. This model led community members to create clone distributions, such as CentOS, to provide a free-of-cost version of RHL, highlighting some tension between community desire for free access and Red Hat's commercial interests. In the early days, the rivalry between Debian and Red Hat was evident in technical choices and culture. They used incompatible package management systems, DEB versus RPM formats. Each became the basis for many derivative distributions, and each cultivated its own ecosystem of users and contributors. Debian's releases were infrequent and conservative, emphasizing quality over novelty, whereas Red Hat pushed more frequent updates and innovation but with an eye on enterprise needs. Debian's community sometimes warily regarded Red Hat's profit-driven decisions. Conversely, Red Hat's proponents saw Debian as idealistic but slow and less attuned to real-world needs. This was not a direct feud in the personal sense, but a persistent divide in approach. When Ubuntu, a new distribution backed by Canonical, appeared in 2004, it added a twist to the Debian-Red Hat dynamic. Ubuntu was based on Debian but aimed to be more user-friendly and had strong commercial sponsorship. Ubuntu's meteoric rise in popularity led to some friction with Debian initially. Debian developers sometimes complained that Ubuntu was leveraging their work without sufficient contribution back. Though not an outright rivalry like others, this situation underscored the theme of community versus corporate influence. Over time, Debian and Ubuntu improved their collaboration, but Canonical's emergence signaled that corporate-backed projects would play an increasingly prominent and sometimes contentious role in the open-source ecosystem. Perhaps the most famous rivalry within the Linux community was the battle between the two major desktop environments, KDE and GNOME. Often dubbed the Desktop Wars, this conflict was both technical and ideological. KDE was founded in 1996 and quickly delivered a comprehensive Windows-like GUI on Linux. However, KDE was built using the Qt toolkit, which at the time was under a proprietary license. In response, developers launched the GNOME project in 1997, aiming to create a desktop environment entirely based on free software. Early on, GNOME received support from the FSF, whereas KDE's developers negotiated with Qt's corporate owner to relicense Qt under open terms. By 2000, Qt was released under the GPL, largely resolving the licensing issue. Despite this resolution, KDE and GNOME evolved with distinct philosophies. KDE emphasized customizability, while GNOME focused on simplicity and consistency. Flame wars erupted among users over which was superior. Distributors picked sides. Red Hat backed GNOME, SUSE supported KDE. Tensions ran high, especially when Red Hat tried to homogenize desktop themes. Over time, both projects matured and began collaborating on interoperability standards. The rivalry cooled but reignited briefly with controversial new versions, KDE 4 and GNOME 3. Some users forked GNOME into Mate and Cinnamon in response. Ultimately, the desktop wars underscored the importance of user choice and open collaboration. In the 2010s, Canonical stirred tension in the Linux world by making unilateral decisions that challenged community norms. Its development of the Unity desktop and Mir display server, instead of adopting GNOME Shell and Wayland, was viewed as fragmentation. Canonical argued these were necessary for their convergence vision across devices. The broader community disagreed. Most notably, Mir failed to gain support from key stakeholders like Intel, and Canonical eventually abandoned it in favor of GNOME and Wayland. Another flashpoint was Snap, Canonical's containerized packaging system. Though technically innovative, Snap was criticized for its centralized structure. Canonical controls the Snap Store, raising concerns about vendor lock-in. Distributions like Linux Mint rejected Snap by default, citing its closed ecosystem. The broader community favored Flatpak, a more decentralized alternative. The Snap versus Flatpak debate illustrated recurring tensions between corporate control and the open ethos of Linux. The introduction of Systemd as a replacement for the traditional sysv init system triggered one of the most intense ideological debates in Linux history. Spearheaded by Lennart Poettering with Red Hat's backing, Systemd brought faster boot times and unified service management. Critics argued it violated the Unix philosophy of small modular tools. The debate intensified when Debian adopted Systemd in 2014, prompting developer resignations and the creation of Devuan, a Systemd-free Debian fork. Supporters praised Systemd's modern features. Detractors saw it as an overreach of Red Hat's influence. The community split along philosophical and practical lines. Desktop users welcomed ease of use. Veteran sysadmins feared lock-in. While Systemd eventually became the default in most major distributions, The conflict left lasting questions about diversity, modularity, and who gets to steer the direction of open source. Over the decades, the Linux and open source communities have navigated a series of internal rivalries and philosophical clashes. These conflicts, be they about the definition of freedom, the right model of collaboration, the best technical design, or the role of corporations, have, in many ways, propelled the community forward. Each rivalry forced participants to articulate their values and justify their choices, leading to greater maturity in how projects are governed and how compromises are struck. While rivalries can be divisive, they also demonstrate the vibrancy of the open source movement, passionate individuals and groups invested in the direction of technology. As of the mid-2020s, Linux is everywhere from servers to smartphones, and it achieved this not by presenting a monolithic front, but by allowing diversity and debate internally. The history of past rivalries suggests that the community will continue to reconcile differences through dialogue, forks, when necessary, and eventually, convergence. These ideological conflicts have been a crucible for defining what openness truly means, ensuring that the ethos of collaboration is continually re-examined and reaffirmed even as the context evolves.